The world of Gothic is unique for many reasons, and one of those reasons is the fauna that inhabits it, the creatures that roam its fields, that dwell in its forests, and lurk in its caves. Now, I use the word creatures and not monsters for a reason. It's because in Gothic, there are very few actual monsters. Things of the supernatural variety, yes, like skeletons, zombies, and demons. Some of the elements borrowed from broader fantasy like orcs and goblins. But the rest of the bestiary is simply composed of animals. But Audioman, I hear you say, things like bloodflies and shadow beasts don't exist in our world. Well, dear viewer, while it's true that they don't exist, the game presents them as if they could exist. The strength of Gothic's creature design lies in the fact that all of the creatures depicted look like they could feasibly exist in the real world. They don't look photorealistic, of course, due to how dated the graphics are, but they look like actual animals inhabiting this world. In fact, the world of Gothic seems to have simply gone down a different evolutionary path from our own. Creatures that have gone extinct here are alive and well in Gothic. Scavengers are pretty much just terror birds. Snappers and razors are dinosaurs. And meatbags, minecrawlers, and bloodflies are equivalent to giant insects that used to roam the prehistoric Earth. Furthermore, when you take a closer look at it, many of the animals that are common in our world are nowhere to be found in Gothic. Now, I'll have to discount Gothic 3 before going forward, not in the least because of the quality of that game on release, but more so because of how much damage to the world building and lore of Gothic it has done, and trying to mesh it together with the rest of the series is simply not worth the hassle, so let's ignore it for now. I may revisit that subject in a future video. Once you take a look around the colony, you might notice that trying to find a deer in one of its forests is a fool's errand. There simply aren't any. However, one of the first characters that you'll meet in the game, a hunter named Drax, will tell you about a creature known as the Scavenger. It's one of the main sources of meat in the colony. It certainly beats eating a meatbag. It stays in small groups and is relatively easy to hunt with a bow. Therefore, the Scavenger, without featuring any physical traits of a deer, fills in its place in the food chain and the ecological niche that the deer would have otherwise occupied. It's a prime game for hunters. Similarly, a shadow beast, without outwardly looking too much like a bear, fills in that animal's niche as an apex predator of the forest and the nearby caves. Therefore, Gothic does something that most RPGs don't even bother doing. It actually integrates its enemies as actual fauna of its world. The mobs in Gothic are, for the most part, not monsters existing simply to fight the player. They are a part of the world just as much as its human inhabitants. They sleep, hunt, and eat other animals. When you approach them, most of them will not simply attack you instantly. Many creatures in Gothic will try to ward you off instead, just like many real-life animals would, while others, like snappers and shadow beasts, will instead stalk you like actual predators would. People living in that world hunt them for food and trophies. The only major difference is that due to how dangerous these creatures are, they very rarely hunt them for sport, and they pretty much never domesticate them. It's essentially a scenario in which their world is inhabited by much more dangerous animals than ours, but animals nonetheless. A scavenger may peck you, and as Drax said, it's better if it doesn't. But a scavenger is not an
ancient mutated super monster from another dimension scared zombie planet.
It's essentially a more dangerous chicken that you hunt instead of breeding. Having said that, one of the design principles behind the creatures in Gothic should be, can this creature exist? Again, we're not talking about the supernatural elements here like the undead. We're talking purely in terms of biology and common sense. With that said, let's take a look at how Falcon Alchemia redesigned some of our old favorites. The first one is the Scavenger, revealed a while back. I have very mixed feelings regarding this one, mostly because they seem to lean more towards a reptilian design, especially by giving the Scavengers fangs. The original was very clearly an avian creature with appropriately avian sounds, while the new version looks more like a mix of a snapper and a Cubone from Pokemon. It's not a terrible design, it's certainly not an eyesore, but I think that it seems to misunderstand the idea behind the original creature, and in a game that is already full of bipedal reptiles chasing after you, we certainly don't need another one. Overall, I guess it could have been worse, but it's certainly no favorite of mine. Furthermore, there's something weird going on here. One of the scavengers appears to have horns on his head and spiky protrusions on his back. People have been theorizing that perhaps these could be signs of sexual dimorphism between a male and a female scavenger, or what's more likely, the visual differences between a young and an adult specimen. I must say, either way, I'm not exactly big on these. Scavengers are early level enemies, and another design principle in Gothic was that you should always have enemies with clearly identifiable threat level. You can have one look at a creature and have a general idea of how dangerous it is. When you look at a scavenger and a lizard, you can instantly tell which one of these is more dangerous. Same with a wolf and a shadow beast, or a goblin and a lurker. Their designs intrinsically inform the player of the challenge that they're about to face, which is crucial in a game where you start off so weak and have to climb your way up, partially by defeating stronger and stronger creatures as you become stronger yourself. So adding horns and fangs to what is essentially a giant XP providing chicken feels like a step backwards in design philosophy. And not only that, but its beak is now a little dull, making it seem like its primary weapon are now its fangs, and the whole creature is now very much colorless except for beige and grey. If you have seen my previous video on armors and locations revealed so far, you know that it's an issue I have with the color palette. However, it is a work in progress, and the devs do take feedback from the community. Speaking of feedback, I do have some edits made of how I, or other members of the community who provided them, think these animals should look. Now, a little disclaimer. I do realize that many artists do not like to see improved edits of their work, and I totally get it. Someone just marches in, scribbles all over your work, and claims it is better. I get that, and it is not my intention to question your competence or your talent. These are not me saying, you messed up, I'm a better artist, because I'm not. I'm not a great artist by any means. I mean, you do see the Odiman on display. What these images are meant to be are tips and general ideas of how community wants these to be. For what it's worth, I have consulted these with the guys over on the official Discord in order to gather feedback myself. I am not that much of a narcissist to think that only I know how things should be. So having said that, this look would probably work better for the scavenger, though admittedly the oversized skull and the happy look is not something that I can just easily scribble over in Medibank. Still, you get the idea. Stick closer not just to the original design, but also to the internal logic of the world, the biology of the creature you're trying to depict, and of course, the design principles. What is this animal's place in the food chain? What does it communicate to the player? Does it make sense? But alright, let's move on to another design. The Minecrawlers, one of the more prominent creatures in the first game. They're tied to both the main quest in the old mine as well as later on, the Minecrawler plate armor mission given to us by Wolf. As such, it's pretty important to get this one right, and I'm of two minds about that one. On one hand, it's undeniably cool, and I can already imagine trying to breach their nest with all those red glowing eyes suddenly popping out in the darkness. On another, I think that the red eyes feel a bit gamey and they don't exactly sell me on the idea of this creature being real. It very much feels like the principle here was, how do we make this thing scary, rather than, how do we make this thing believable? Furthermore, I think that the developers lean a bit too much into the arachnid idea with this one. The Minecrawlers were always pretty much oversized, dangerous ants. They had a roughly ant-like design, they had a queen laying the eggs, they were split into workers and warriors, and the only indicator of any spider-like traits was the webbing that could be found in the areas that they inhabited. I wish they had chosen to give it more ant-like features, but overall, this is by no means a bad design. However, it makes me think, if these are the workers, then what will the warriors look like? Also, going back to the red eyes for a bit, I wish they were toned down a little. The original Minecrawlers had this dark crimson fleshy look to their eyes, implying that perhaps they didn't see the same way that we do, and it made sense for creatures that spend their entire lives underground, in the darkness. Overall, I wish it was a bit closer to the original, but not bad, just needs a little toning down, I think. Now, we go over to the goblins. I cannot help but appreciate their festive spirit. That's quite a big departure from the original, but I can get behind the whole Christmas-oriented goblins idea. I mean, it does raise some issues, such as, doesn't that imply that there's Jesus in Gothic? I mean, I think that we can certainly make this work if— Okay, I'm sorry, I'll be serious now. The goblins are probably my second favorite design revealed so far. I absolutely love how creepy their faces look, and I appreciate the detail in their skin and teeth. If I had to have a complaint, I would have said that while I enjoy the creepiness, their faces are now too human-like. If you look at their noses, they are pretty much like ours instead of the animalistic snout-like ones that they used to have. I think in general they seem too advanced, and to be clear, I don't mean the festive stuff, I mean their actual equipment. Goblins in Gothic were never a sentient species on par with humans and orcs. They do appear to have some degree of intelligence. We see in Gothic 1 that they will steal items and put them in chests. Gothic 2 reveals that they know how to start a campfire, and in Night of the Raven we see goblin warriors, which are covered in primitive armor. In Gothic 3, which doesn't exist and doesn't comply with the lore, there are even goblin shamans. However, since that game doesn't exist, the top of their game is making a campfire and putting together some very crude armor. If you look at the goblin warriors, their equipment is very rough and rusty. It seems that most of it was looted off of unfortunate adventurers and then repurposed, bent and cracked to suit their needs. The armors that we see in this short are all very neat, very human looking and almost expertly crafted. I hope that in the final game they stick to a more animalistic depiction of goblins. Moving forward, we have the early rendition of a snapper from an April Fool's joke. As such, I think it's safe to say that it's very much a work in progress, so I'll just quickly go over it. It's not terrible, but I think it misses some of the character of the original. I miss the mean look that the snappers always had. That thing not only is looking forward to eating you, but is going to be looking mean while eating you. I also don't like the arms and the coloration because they both make it look like a very generic dinosaur rather than a unique species of it. And I can't believe I'm saying it, but I miss the beige. Alright, moving on. The meat bug. The meat bug is perfect. Mwah! Chef's kiss. And this brings us to the latest creature shown by the developers. The bloodfly. Now, this is the one that was probably received the worst by the community. Pretty much everyone agreed that this direction is just terrible. Everything about the original design philosophy was just completely thrown out of the window here in favor of slapping a huge mouthful of teeth and red glowing eyes on this creature. It looks silly, as insects don't even have that kind of teeth or fangs. They have mandibles, as the original did. The bloodfly was always pretty much just the Gothic equivalent of a mosquito. Yes, it was dangerous and potentially deadly in larger groups, but so is the scavenger, and oh wait, we did slap fangs on the scavenger, even though that didn't really make sense neither. What I'm seeing here is an attempt to make these animals more monstrous without any real reason for it, other than someone looking at them as generic video game monsters, and as a result that's the feel that I get from these creatures. It feels very much like a video game bug monster, like I've seen this thing 100 times in other games. But Audioman, I hear you say, why are you making such a fuss about fangs on a scavenger or a bloodfly? It's not like the remake will be terrible just because of these. Well, dear viewer, the point is that while these two things will by no means ruin the remake, taking this direction with the creature design will rob it of one of the original's greatest strengths, its world building. If we throw away the believable, unique creatures that were such an iconic part of the world of Gothic, and it's not like the devs don't know, literally the first thing that we see in the Old Mine trailer is a meat bag, in favor of generic RPG monster design, then something of value, one of those things that should be brought back for both old and new fans to enjoy in the remake, will be lost. And there's a reason why Alchemia asked for feedback on these. They know that a lot can go wrong on the developmental process. Some things will change, and some changes are good, but some are not. We all remember the playable teaser. Hell, I still see comments from people dismissing the remake just because of how much they hated that teaser. And the fact that it was scrapped proves that Alchemia is committed to listening to the fans. And hopefully, by cooperating, the devs and the community can give this game a proper remake that it rightfully deserves. I'm Audioman, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll hear you next time.